DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And this evening we have some appetizers. I kind of need to make up for because UFC 301 was last Saturday, and the big thing, I guess it was just three weeks ago, the huge event, the marquee event, UFC 300, kind of overwhelmed, was the bigger event to 301. So I just kind of forgot that there was another event after 300 coming up so soon, because it wasn't even a month later, or like a month and a week later. It was just 3 weeks later, and they're already trying to, I wouldn't say necessarily match three UFC 300, because each even number of 100, UFC 100, UFC 200, UFC 300. Obviously, those events counted by 100 are the ones that they care about them the most. But man, I almost just completely missed this event even happening, and that's a hard one for me to say, because since probably back in 2005, somewhere in that range, 2005, 2008, I've seen like every number UFC event like in that time period. So the fact that I almost missed this podcast, that's the reason I didn't do a prediction podcast, because I realized that they were having another event that was like on Friday afternoon, and then just didn't feel like doing it on Saturday. But yeah, so we've done it now. I was able to get my own personal picks in, I guess, as I was watching the UFC event. So if you want to believe whether those are picks that I actually made before the event actually happened, then that's fine. And if not, then that's fine too. But we'll go over what my picks were for this event. Like always, usually mostly focused on the main event. And I mean, it's be hard not to really just focus on just the main event, because this card is just nothing in the quality of fighters compared to UFC 300. You got like an old, like washed up Jose Aldo, and you got the flyweight championship, which neither of those Alex Pantoja is really not the most exciting fighter in the world. Same thing with Anthony Smith. Just none of these are all older guys, some that are kind of come towards the end of their career, like Paul Craig and Anthony Smith. Like these are guys that were pretty famous and well marqueed fighters maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, but they're guys that are probably lucky to make it on the main card of a numbered event, a premium live event like that. But that's what you have on this card. But so let's get into UFC 300 anyways. So can I get a menu? And so UFC 300, it happened at it happened May 4th, 2024 on Saturday at the Farmesa Arena, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and it had an attendance of 14.5 thousand. So that they had a pretty big number of people in there, and that's UFC 300 flyweight championship bout between Pantoja, Alexander Pantoja and Steve Erceg. So let's just talk about the first fight on the card here. So the first fight on the card, main event, is a middleweight bout between Caio Borrello versus Paul Craig. And like I said, I missed the chance and the opportunity to do a prediction video. So I don't have the receipts, but as I go along, you'll probably realize that I didn't have receipts. So, because I think with just these 5 fights on the main card, I think I got more than half of them wrong. But we'll just go over them. So there's should be no idea or thought that I'm cheating because I didn't get every single one of these right. So we'll be honest with our picks, just as whether you believe me. But one of the first things I want to do, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. I'm real good at this. So this was some subscribers. I had some new subscribers from the last video, which was a New Orleans Saints based video. But I want to shout out some of these people anyway. So I had like 70 something. And since that video, I've had like 74. So I've had a couple more people out there subscribe and stuff. And I'm really appreciative of anyone that subscribes, likes, shares, any of that comments. I want to hear from anyone out there. So there was a couple more, but I was able to identify one person in particular, and that's Kurt 2512. So I want to shout out Kurt 2512. I appreciate you subscribing and liking, sharing, whatever you do to help the channel go and help me keep it going. The more people that subscribe, the more people that like, that just motivates me to keep going. And I just love to try to be doing numbers. It's not as easy as people try to make it out to be, but I want to do numbers. So I appreciate that, Kurt 2512. I know that you probably watched some Saints, New Orleans Saints related videos and not this UFC, but I just hope that you can enjoy both. So I appreciate that, Kurt. All right, so now on to UFC 300, Pantoja versus Erceg. This is the main card, the pay-per-view. So in the first bout on the card was a middleweight bout between Caio Borrello versus Paul Craig. And just going off of my first pick of how I picked this fight, I picked Paul Craig, just more as the veteran fighter. He's kind of known for his Brazilian jiu-jitsu and like his wrestling. That's kind of more what he's known for than anything. Like he his wrestling and his Brazilian jiu-jitsu and like submissions and stuff. Because out of like the 17 wins, 13 of them have come by submission. So we knew that his main course to victory for Paul Craig was ground defense. But I guess while the fight was going on, they were talking about how he had changed. I guess he had changed teams that he's with now. Trying to see, he's higher level martial arts. I guess is the team that he was working with. And I guess during a lot of the training with them, he's trying to learn like what boxing and kickboxing, like striking. And when you saw him in this fight against Baralo, he was standing in like a stance, to strike, but was just never really throwing any punches or any kicks, just kind of standing there. And he went for a couple takedowns throughout the first quarter and into the second quarter, and then just could never get Baralio down or anything like that. And just after Baralio kind of noticed into the second round that him getting taken down's no threat. Any of the punches or kicks that he's thrown, that rarely the ones that he throws don't have any power behind him, and he just kind of laid into Paul Craig and knocked him out at 2 minutes 10 seconds of the second round. So I'd pick Paul Craig. Like I said, I went for the more veteran fighter in this scenario, but we found out real quick that if he can't get Barallo down, then he had pretty much no chance of winning this fight. And the way that I guess he changed teams, at the age of 36 years old, will be 37 this year old. I mean, if you don't have a high level or elite striking ability at that point in your career and in your life, I imagine you're not going to become a great fighter, a great striker, if you can't get your opponent down. All right. But I picked Paul Craig to win that. Like I said, I kind of did these picks last minute. So I didn't pick particularly how I thought Paul Craig was going to win. But he didn't win anyway, so I guess it's kind of irrelevant. All right, now then, on to a middleweight bout between Michel Pereira versus Eor Ponteria. Yeah, Eor Ponteria. And that fight, I'd pick Michael Pereira, Michel Pereira, mainly because Igor Poteria is kind of a newer fighter. Hadn't heard too much about him. Not the easiest fighter to find, like on Wikipedia or anything like that. So he's definitely more of a small town fighter. Trying to think, he was like he was a Russian or somewhere in there from Europe, and he thought that he was going to come in there and beat Michael Pereira, and just with the way they met up a couple times with some striking and clinched up a little bit, and then about 50 seconds in, because Michel Pereira is on coming into this fight. Let's see, he was on a 7 fight winning streak coming into this match, and has 9 submission by nine, yeah, 9 wins by submission, which I guess that includes this one. But coming into this, I guess it was only 8, and in that 7, he had 2 by submission, 1 by rear naked choke, and another one by rear naked choke. But during some scrambles, they had a couple strikes and a couple clinching, and in those scrambles, that fit just 54 seconds of the first round, Eor Poteria left his neck out there and got caught and basically got put out. Michael Pereira, Michel Pereira held on to that to the last second. He tapped a couple times, and then the ref checked it, and when he left, he pretty much collapsed in the middle of the ring. Eor Poteria did, so that was impressive. I didn't pick a particular way that I thought Michel Pereira would win, but I figured he'd win. Just mainly never heard of Eor before, so that was simple enough. So we're 1-1 like that. And now then, on to the third fight of UFC 301. It's a light heavyweight bout between. If you followed my podcast and you followed any kind of talk that I've had about the UFC or any of the fighters, you probably know that I'm just the biggest fan of Anthony Smith. The doorstep, the stepping stone, the jag, just a guy. A can is how I kind of look at Anthony Smith. But so he had Anthony Smith. This is light heavyweight versus Vitor Petrino, and I just kind of, like I said, he's a stepping stone, a door that these higher profile fighters just have to get through. And so it was Alex Smith versus Vitor Petrino. And obviously, I'm just with what you're hearing me spew out here, I'm not the biggest fan of Anthony Smith since he got beaten pretty much alive. Who was that? By Alex Glover Teixeira back in 2020. I just can't take any fight or anything that he does serious anymore, because he was literally beaten to death in that fight back then. So you could see where I wouldn't be picking Anthony Smith to start this fight, because just on top of my feelings towards how quality of a fighter he is, I'm just not a fan. Not a fan. There's very few fighters really in the UFC where it's like, I'm a fan, so I can't be pulling for you, or you're a fan, you're a fan favorite of mine, I'm pulling for you no matter what. So, but it's like almost no matter what, I'm not a huge fan of Anthony Smith. But this fight, the outcome of it and the time limit of it turned out to be very similar to the Michel Pereira versus Eor Poteria fight, and it was a guillotine submission choke again, and it kind of started out very similar, where they were throwing some strikes at each other. The stuff that Vitor Petrino looked like he was landing a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, but just like Eor Poteria, Victor Petrino left his neck out there, left his neck out there, and Anthony Smith, I think, Michel Pereira, Eor Poteria one was a standing guillotine. Michel Pereira put Eor Poteria out with a standing guillotine, and then this one uh, was Anthony Smith. Is it started out as a standing guillotine around the 2 minute mark of the first round, and uh, Anthony Smith put Vitor Petrino in like a standing guillotine, I believe, and then Vitor Petrino picked him up and tried to slam him to get him off, and that just ended up putting him in a tighter guillotine where he had his legs triangled and was just had the full force of having him on the ground because when he slammed him down, it just made it tighter for Anthony Smith. So at the 2 minute mark of the first round, Anthony Smith, the old premier, the old vet, pulling out kind of a sneaky win. I wasn't prepared for that, but I think he was kind of set up for Vitor Petrino to maybe get an easier win, you know, continue the growth of his career. But he goes from being 11-0 to 11-1 and having his first loss by a guy that's, I would say, closer to the end of his career than the start of it. And he just after this win against the fighter that's unranked and stuff, he still feels as if he's just full of himself. Anthony Smith is. He still believes that his next fight or two is going to be a title shot for light heavyweight. I just couldn't imagine him fighting someone like Alex Pereira. Putain would probably knock Anthony Smith's head off. So that leaves me just at 1-2. You know, I probably just put Vitor Petrino, and maybe not even off of statistics of his fighting or his fighting style or his record. You know, he was 11-0 coming into this fight. It's more just my dislike for Anthony Smith, the jobber Anthony Smith. But he continued to show that he can make money in this business. All right, now then, on to the co-main event, and this is a co-main event, a bantamweight bout between Jose Aldo versus Jonathan Martinez, and this is one where they do some of these like they do some of these five round fights, you know, fights that are like title eliminators or just sometimes the co-main event will be a 5 round fight. But this one wasn't. I was a little surprised by that just because, you know, it's Jose Aldo versus Jonathan Martinez. I mean, majority of Jose Aldo's matches when he was still fighting before he retired. Well, he's been retired for like a year or two, and then went to the Hall of Fame, and then he's been out of the UFC a little bit, and now he's coming back. But I just would have thought that Jose Aldo is more used to just all the fights that he's been in. I'm probably almost half of them have all been like title shots or 5 round fights. So I just kind of figured that would be like that, and also for you know a Jonathan Martinez, a top 15 bantamweight, maybe him get used to it, or if that could propel him into the on a top 10 opponent. But that didn't happen, and it ended up being an easy win for Jose Aldo. And just like these out of these prior three out of the last four, I picked Jonathan Martinez to win this because I just thought, you know, he's kind of a young up and coming fighter. Jose Aldo hasn't fought for what, like a year or two. So I just thought I didn't think Jose Aldo was gonna come out and look pretty much the same as he always has, you know, explosive, some of the best kickboxing in the bantamweight division, and just looked basically a step ahead, maybe 2 step ahead all night against Jonathan Martinez, and pretty much strictly just a kickboxing match. There was really nothing else more to that fight than that. And so I picked Jonathan Martinez. It ended up being a decision victory, so that would have been the 15-minute mark of the third round, and that was a decision unanimous. So 30-27, 30-27, 30-27. And Jose Aldo pretty much looked dominant and very impressive for a fighter that's been, you know, quote unquote retired for a little bit and then coming right back into the fold and beating a top 15 bantamweight. So that is impressive. I guess I need to have some more respect for some of these older fighters, Anthony Smith and I mean Jose Aldo's a Hall of Famer, one of the best UFC fighters, mixed martial artists, and bantamweights of all time. So I should have I guess I should have treaded a little lighter when hating on him in comparison to Anthony Smith, who has fought for the belt but never held it, and I wouldn't even say is on near the same arc and trajectory as Jose Aldo's career. He'll be quickly forgotten about. Besides the fact that Anthony Smith is a commentator, a booth commentator. All right, so that was the co-main event between Jose Aldo and Jonathan Martinez. So now we are on to the main event. So this is UFC 300, and that is the flyweight title bout, championship bout between Alexander Pantoja versus who is the champion versus Steve Erceg. And so when I went first into this, I'm trying to think, did I go over that? I want to say that I'm not sure that I went over the fight of the night bonuses, but so there's $50,000 bonuses. So they went back from UFC 300 to 301. So from 300 to 301, they've gone back from going to $100,000 for a bonus back down to 50,000, which they've been handing out that same amount for seems like 20 years now. But so that was the 300. No, it wasn't 100,000 that they were giving out at UFC 300. It was 300,000, but who was it? Was it Max Holloway won two of them, so he ended up getting like 600,000 himself. But anyways, they're back to the 50,000 mark. And what I thought is kind of weird about who won these awards was that there was no fight of the night. So there wasn't a fight of the night, but there was four performance of the nights. Michel Pereira, Caio Borrello, Marcio Rufi, and Alexandro Costa. So nothing against any of those guys getting like their performance of the nights bonuses, but I'm just a little surprised that the flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja versus Steve Erceg what wasn't a fight of the night, honestly, because I mean it could have easily it ended up being just a decision. So it went all 5 rounds, all 25 minutes, and it was decision, and it was unanimous. But it was 48, 47, 48, 47, and then kind of a weird ranking there, judging the 49, 46. But those 48, 47 to 48, 47, those two, that could have been flipped on its head, kind of depending on how people judge the fifth round. So just I'm trying to break this fight down into rounds a little bit. So the first round was Alexander Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. So in the first round, Alexander Pantoja pretty much dominated that whole fight. Was able to take Steve Erceg down, didn't really take any real damage in regards to that, and just controlled Steve Erceg for the whole fight. And then in the second round, kind of similar things happened, but it wasn't quite as dominant as a performance from Alex Pantoja. Holding him down and not really taking any damage in the striking game when they are on their feet. And so it was just kind of a lot of the same, but not as dominant as Pantoja was in the first round. So then in the third round, it's kind of more of the same that was in the first and the second round. But then towards the end of that round, Steve Erceg landed a really good elbow shot, like with just like a minute or two left in the fight, that left Alexander Pantoja like leaking all over the place. He landed a good elbow like right in the hairline here, up in the hairline in the scalp area, which always bleeds a lot, whether it's a real bad cut or not. But he was bleeding a lot from that, and just for the whole fight up until that point, that was probably the most damage that had been caused, because even in the first and in the second round, where Pantoja was kind of controlling the fight and was taking Steve Erceg down, he wasn't really causing any damage, really. So you had that round where it looked like maybe Steve Erceg is gonna steal this fight with still this round because of the amount of damage he caused in round three. And then you roll over into round four, and it's a little more even here, where Steve Erceg is avoiding the takedown by Alec Pantoja, but Pantoja is kind of mixing it in there as well. But it definitely looked like Steve Erceg controlled this round even more. So that's round four, and he even actually went crazy that he actually even went for a takedown in this round, which it's lucky it didn't backfire on him in this round. That is because it did in the fifth round. So you after the third and the fourth round, you could have said that it's up, that they're tied 2-2 in this 5 round fight, and it seemed like Steve Erceg was pretty much controlling like the whole fight up until like the last minute or two. He was controlling the fight, keeping his distance from Alex Pantoja, and just kind of point striking him. Nothing too serious. Looked like either one of them was close to landing any like finishing shots standing up, and then just kind of out of nowhere, Steve Erceg just tries to go for a takedown, and Alexander Pantoja rolls through and ends up on top and is kind of halfway trying to get a leg lock, and then he just ends up getting on top, and he has side control, uh, half guard, full mount, and he just ends up finishing the fight on the ground, the fifth round on the ground, and probably stole that to where Alexander Pantoja won round one, round two, and then round five, which I mean, Steve Erceg looked like he was easily on his way to win the last 3 rounds in a row, three, four, and five, but ended up blowing it by his own horrible decision to try to take down the wrestler, take down the fighter that has the superior takedown, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and trying to take them down when basically all you had to do to probably secure that win is stay standing, and stay point striking. So that was a kind of a disappointing uh, loss for Steve Erceg, just because he's a young fighter, only 28 years old, and has only had 14 up till that point. He only had 13 fights in his career and only had one loss. Another loss, like his second fight of his career, was the decision. So it's just a little disappointing to see it happen like that. And so we, look, coming into this, I am what, 1-3 coming into this, and I just stuck with Alexander Pantoja to win this. So I picked Alexander Pantoja to win this over the young up and coming Steve Erceg. Never didn't hadn't heard a lot about him coming in this card. He'd had 3 more fights in the UFC previously, so he was 3-0 and had 2 wins by decision, and then his last win leading up to this was a KO punch over Matt Chanel. And that wasn't at a UFC event either. That was at a fight night, Rosenstruth versus Gaziv, that was March 2nd, 2024. But I mean, he's still a young up and coming fighter, and with the performance that he put forward, if he can improve his jiu-jitsu or improve his wrestling, I don't see why Steve Erceg won't be a champion in the future. Uh, but so that ended up just making me 2-3 on the night of the main card. So I hope with that explanation of it, and that showing you my record afterwards with no receipts, hopefully that's believable that I have a under 500 record there. But let's go over these real quick one more time. So this is the main card of UFC 300, Pantoja versus Erceg. And so the middleweight bout between Caio Borralho versus Paul Craig. I picked Paul Craig, but he ended up getting knocked out KO punches at 2 minutes and 10 seconds of the second round. So didn't start off the pay-per-view too hot. And then middleweight bout between Michel Pereira versus Eor Patera ended up being a submission guillotine choke at 54 seconds of the first round. And I'd pick Pereira, Michel Pereira to win this. No particular outcome, method, but so that led me to 1-1. And then the lightweight heavyweight bout between, like I said, my favorite fighter, Anthony Smith, versus Vitor Petrino. Just another guillotine choke, 2 guillotine chokes in a row. So that was submission guillotine choke at 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes and of the first round again. And like I said, my buddy Anthony Smith still showing that he's respectable, I guess, in the UFC community and can beat other fighters. They were talking about how he didn't gain anything by fighting a young up and cutter coming fighter like Vitor Petrino. Like if he lose, it just knocked him farther down the line. But those are about the only guys that he can beat. He can only beat fighters that are washed like him or young, up and coming, inexperienced fighters. So more, it was just as detrimental to him depending on who he fought. If he fought someone that was too good for him to beat, or if he fought someone that's not really that respectable of a win. But Anthony Smith won another fight, regardless, with another guillotine choke. So that put me at 1-2 there. So then on to the co-main event between bantamweight co-main event between Jose Aldo versus Jonathan Martinez, which this fight it was a little surprising, just mainly because Jose Aldo fighting and it's a co-main event. I guess because there was no, like, this wasn't a title eliminator fight or anything like that. Even though Jose Aldo mentioned that he would like to be fighting for the title soon, I guess he at most would like to fight and win one more time and get maybe his final title shot of his career. But Jose Aldo ended up only having to fight 3 rounds here and just won unanimous decision, 30-27, 30-27, 30-27, and was just step or two faster in the striking game, and Jose Aldo's takedown defense or want of having any kind of ground game was superior to Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan Martinez just really couldn't get anything done edgewise in this fight. And then on to the main event, which is a flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Steve Erceg, the challenger. And that fight ended up going decision. It very well could have gone the other way for Steve Erceg to win, or it could have gone split decision. But I think just with the output that Steve Erceg had put through the first 4 rounds of the fight, like he was on pace. He was on pace to win this fight, to become the new flyweight champion. But it ended up taking himself down by going for a shot and then getting rolled through and ending up on the bottom. He should have just done everything in his power to end that fight, that flyweight championship bout, on the ground, and the majority of that on the ground. Because even though Alexander Pantoja dominated all the ground time in this fight, it's not like he really caused any damage after the end of the fight. Alexander Pantoja was the one leaking from multiple spots on his forehead. So it will be interesting to see where Steve Erceg career goes and how long it will be before he ends up getting another title shot, which he respectably may have not have earned it because he hadn't had a lot of fights in the UFC or anything like that. Maybe hadn't earned it, seeing how he'd only had like 3 UFC up until that point, but he deserved it with the performance and output that he had. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you this evening. Try to keep a little bit better tabs on the events that are coming up, because I really almost completely forgot and missed UFC 301 just because it wasn't a banger really. There wasn't anything too exciting about it, and just the fact that it was just like three weeks later is when it popped up. So let's see. So UFC 302, which has some more interesting fights on the card, just like the 2 main events. are pretty interesting, and it's kind of only about 3 or just barely 4 weeks away, so it's not even like a full month away because it's June 1st. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, so I guess that's about 4 weeks or so. But it's got some interesting fights for the main event is the lightweight championship between Islam Makhachev and definitely the fan favorite and Dustin Poirier. Depending on how this fights, this if Dustin Poirier doesn't win this, this could arguably be his last shot at a title. And then you got just big good mouthpieces for the UFC and middleweight bout between Sean Strickland and Paulo Costa. That should just be entertaining just for the fighters itself. But yeah, I'll definitely keep a better note here for when UFC 300 is going to be like the way before the I guess around the time of weigh-ins and the press conferences. We'll try to remember this one again and try not to gloss over UFC 301 like we did. But I hope the predictions that I gave you or the results that I gave you are good enough and help you a little bit if you didn't get to see them yourself, didn't get to experience it live yourself. But comparing it to UFC 300 to UFC 301, going into that event, you really didn't think it was going to be that great. I mean, how could it be as good as UFC 300? You thought it was going to be a little bit underwhelming, but maybe that was just because of the names on the card. But the results and the outcomes and the method was just exciting. Those were exciting submissions with the guillotine choke, the knockout of Paul Craig. I mean, I thought I thought the the main event between what was it, Alexander Pantoja and Steve Erceg. I thought that could have been fight of the night. So it was just from when you step back and just look from it from the outside, it didn't have all the big name or meek and marquee fights or more than one title fight on the card. But just if you're just a strictly mixed martial arts fan and just enjoy a fight regardless of who's in the fight, it was a great card, great pay per view, and like I always say, I'm prepared. I say that I'm always prepared for the next one. I probably said that after UFC 300, and then almost missed it. Had to tune in like the day of to watch it. But we're in, and I'm ready for UFC 302. I think those are some interesting fights on that card, and maybe they'll add something else to kind of solidify the card, just splitting it up from the main card, preliminary card, to early preliminary card. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So can I get a check, please?